Welcome to the Catholic Table Talk podcast. This is where everything Catholic is on the table. New episodes Thursdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on most podcast platforms. Here's your host, William Sauber.
In today's society, it's kind of hard not to talk about sex. It doesn't matter what age your children are. In today's society, a lot of parents of younger kids might think, Benny is only 6 or 7, or Sophia is about a little younger. I don't really need to talk to them about sex. My husband or my wife and I don't really have to talk about sex right now with them because they're so young. We don't have to worry about it until they bring a significant other home with them one day. But in today's society, that is not really the norm that you should be taking, just because of all of the sex stuff happening out there that goes against the Catholic Church. Whether that's changing your sex, or that's just really confused about the sex, or also, just sex in general, but also just having your kids going to a public school or going someplace and then hearing stuff about sex that will automatically change their mind, or learn about that particular subject of what they're learning about sex, and they don't know any better, and you're not teaching them it like you're supposed to. So again, in today's society, we need to kind of take advantage of teaching our kids, even at a very young age, about sex, and doing it at your home instead of having someone else teach them about it at school or anywhere else. So, getting that message out there first to them. So that's all we're going to be talking about today on episode 135. Thank you again so much for joining us here at the table. Couldn't be possible without your continued support. Also, just real quickly, make sure you like the video, subscribe to all of our platforms, and share the show with friends and family. Hit the notification button so you never miss a week's show. And if you have a speaker or a show request, please email us at catholictt@gmail.com. Again, it's Catholic with 2 T's at gmail.com for a show speaker request, or if you want to become a sponsor of the show, you can do that as well via email. All right, we have a very special guest with us today. She is making her Catholic Table Talk debut. She is author of multiple books, and just a little bio about her. Her name is Dr. Julia Sadusky. She is an author, speaker, and licensed psychologist. She owns Lux Counseling and Consulting in Littleton, Colorado, where she offers individual, family, and couples therapy, in addition to consultations for individuals and families around sexuality and gender. Dr. Sadusky obtained a bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in theology. So bachelor's in psychology and minor in theology from Ave Maria University, and completing her doctorate at Wayne University in Virginia. And we're going to talk about her book today, Start Talking to Your Kids About Sex. And again, this is more kind of centered at the younger age, that many parents probably don't think that they should be talking to the kids about sex away. So let's welcome in Dr. Julia Sadusky. So Dr. Julia, again, thank you for taking the time today to come on the show and talk about sex with your kids.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be with you. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. So, and yeah, that's basically the first question. I know you have a book out and it has lots of great reviews. I saw about it's called Start Talking to Your Kids About Sex. And I guess this might be a little bit of a broad question, perhaps, Doctor, but just for any type of new parents or just parents out there who really don't want to talk to the kids about sex, or don't really know how to, how should they start talking to the kids about sex?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that sticks out to me with that question is we can't simply do the thing we want to do because we want to do it. And that's been something really striking in walking with families who, even those who want to have these conversations, let alone those who don't want to have these conversations early and often,
Right.
that desire doesn't translate into action for many of us. And so in my book, the first thing I try to do is help parents reflect a little bit on who taught me about sex and what were the impacts of that on my own confidence in having these conversations. So, who taught you? Asking yourself that question and really understanding the messages you got and how that's going to impact your willingness, your readiness, and your confidence in talking with young kids. So I actually think that's the first thing. And then secondarily, I would say that there are conversations that are incremental that build a foundation for the traditional sex talk at puberty. But by virtue of everything you mentioned at the start of the show, as well as simply the fact that we haven't been effective in sex education historically, I think we want to be a little bit more thoughtful about what can I teach my child at 2, at 5, at 7 that helps build a foundation for a Catholic sexual ethic that is not talking about sexual intercourse per se, right? So
Sure.
people sometimes freak out when they see the title of the book. Oh my gosh, you want me to talk with my 2-year-old about sex? Well, no.
Right.
Really what we want to do is begin with naming your genitalia, naming a child's genitalia for them, helping them use accurate language for that, helping them understand what healthy exploration of their body is, boundaries with people they don't know or people they may not be comfortable with physically. And, we kind of build that through the book, but really beginning to have stepwise conversations that by the time puberty hits, there's nowhere else a child would want to go to ask questions about sexuality than their parents.
Right. Yeah, and that's a great point because I mean, again, it's you want to have your kids talk to you about sex, and you want to have your kids going off to someone else talking about sex, or like I said, getting the different idea or getting the wrong interpretation of it. For sure. So I mean, I know in my intro I just kind of named a couple of kids and the ages, and you mentioned some ages in there too. But from this book, I mean, what is kind of the more the target audience about kids? Like, what are the ages that you should start talking to kids about sex?
Yeah, so this first book is for kids age 0 to about 8, is
Okay,
really the framework for that. So if you have a kid in your life, whether you're a parent, an educator, a priest or a religious, a pastor, or a family member, a godparent, aunt, uncle,
right,
cousin, whatever, this book is for you. Now, it is shaped towards parents who are going to be the primary educator of their kids. That's what the church teaches. That's what I want to support. And anybody who wants to support parents in what they're trying to do, I think parents would be the primary audience. And any parents really of children and teens are going to benefit from this book if they don't feel equipped yet to have conversations about sexuality.
sure. And I mean, can I just throw one question in here, kind of the blue? I mean, like you made a great point. Like if your parents are teenagers and you're not really, you know, ready to have that talk yet, this is a great book for them. And last question you mentioned that think about when or who said who brought up sex to you. Was your parents and stuff who taught you about sex. I guess this other blue question is like, what happens if no one really talked to them about sex and I mean, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to make here. If they haven't been talked to about the sex before, I mean about sex when they were younger, so like this is the type of book that again is shoot, I had a great point now I'm blanking out on it. This is the book that you can go this is a good book for beginners, I should say.
That's exactly right.
Okay,
Yeah, I think for people who, I've had some friends who are therapists who work a lot in this space. They said they still learned a lot from the book,
sure,
and it's still really marketed for most people who didn't get exactly what you described, which is nobody taught them really anything. They had to figure it out on their own. They figured it out mostly through peers, through teachers, maybe sometimes through people who engaged in some type of sexual violation against them, pornography, masturbation. These were the ways that people have learned historically about sex in the church as much as outside of it. And so if you don't feel like you had role models, you're in really good company with most of us. And
Right.
really, that's the point of the book is let me give you scripts of how to incrementally have these conversations, because apart from having a role model, how the heck are you going to do it, right?
Right.
And so that's really the whole point of the book.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Sorry about a little. I was blinking out on what I was trying to get at there, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's right on.
Yeah. So just regardless, I mean, so you've gone through the 4 steps, you read the book, and now it's time for a talk, right? Now it's time to sit your kids down and really kind of have a talk with them about it after dinner, or maybe at dinner. But how can you make the talk comfortable for everyone in the room? Because I mean, just you as parents don't feel comfortable about talking to your kids about about sex, and then but then you wonder how they're going to feel, right? So how can you make it just more comfortable for the whole family just to sit and really have a good conversation, and then not like talking for a little bit and this is weird, this is awkward, and you just leave. But how you make it more a lot how do you make it comfortable for everyone?
Yeah, so you really are going to want to sprinkle in these conversations when you're doing something else with your child. So,
Sure.
something I talk about in the book is, for instance, teaching about accurate terms for genitalia you can do while you're changing your child's diaper or while they're taking a bath. Um, these would be very natural times where you could make a comment. It doesn't have to be a whole 5-minute conversation. It's just, oh, did you notice that that's actually your penis and your sister has what's called a vagina and those are different? And that's the end of the conversation, right?
Sure.
That's one. So doing that as a parent gradually is actually going to help with your anxiety as well, because you're just moving past it. And this is really key, is then shifting the focus to something else. So, what do you think about this bath bomb you get to use? Or,
Sure.
what do you like about that toy? Let's play with that truck again. You're just making it a part of normal life, because the truth is our bodies are a part of our normal lives, and they're good and they're created by God, and they're not meant to be something taboo. So that would be one example. As kids get a little older, I think we know about children developmentally that they do better when they're playing or when you're kind of alongside them. So maybe you're driving in the car and you see a billboard and you make a comment about that. That's a teachable moment. Or you ask them a question, have you ever wondered about blank, right? Or you're in the grocery store and there's a flyer that says something about gay people, and you want to kind of have a teachable moment about that. You can see already that it's not, we're going to go at home after dinner and we're going to have a conversation where we're staring at each other for 30
Sure.
minutes, which that makes kids very uncomfortable.
Right.
Um, but to really be able to do it in the midst of your daily life, that's the key. And if you can do something else with your child, playing a game, going for a walk, going for a drive, that's going to make you and your child more comfortable because you're not staring at each other. So that would be another key. And then for parents to pick moments when you feel a bit more energy, a bit more calm. And if you do want to have a sit down conversation about something that's going to take a little bit more time, maybe mom says to dad, hey, I want to have a conversation with so and so tonight. Can I take a bath before and just kind of calm my nerves? Or
Sure.
can you give me 30 minutes to just go for a walk and listen to music? Those are the things that I want to help parents think about. What refills my cup so that when I'm sitting down to have a conversation, or when a conversation is sprung upon me that I wasn't planning for, how do I have that more effectively? And then the last thing I'll say is this: if your kid asks a question, which they will ask many questions, I hope, of
Oh
you,
yeah.
when they ask that question and you are not ready, let's say you just got bad news about a family member that their cancer came back, or, work is really stressful and you're just not in a position, it's okay to deflect and say, oh my gosh, what a good question. I want to think about that more before I answer. Let's circle back. Now, the
Sure.
key is to circle back. So you don't
Right.
have to be ready in every moment. That's not realistic at all for parents. So be able to give yourself some time till you're in a better position and make sure you circle back.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just when you're giving all the great content there, the one question that was up in my mind too was, like you said, you saw amazing out at the grocery store about gay people or something else about that's not really aligned with the Catholic teachings. I think that would be a great thing to maybe, because again, I mean, out in public, you don't know who's standing next to you, what their views are, and everything. It's a very, I guess, touchy society, I should say. So that might be, some if your kids ask you a question about gay marriage or something else, and you don't feel comfortable speaking out in public, more in a public setting with a lot of people around, that might be a good place to deflection as well, I take it.
Mm. Yes, I think that's a good example of, I mean, there's all kinds
Okay.
of things that kids will
Right.
say in public that we say, oh, you know what? Let's talk about that more later. And with young kids,
Right.
especially, they don't tend to have a filter. Now, there
No.
probably is something a parent could say there in the midst of saying, yeah, let's talk about that more, is like, you know what? That person in that picture, God made that person, God loves that person, and we're called to treat that person with respect. If they were here, we want to get to know them better. And we can talk more about um, marriage and what that means when we get in the car. So you're just kind of shaping, and you can see how you're just creating a good space for that child to know that they asked a very valid question, and there's no one else you'd rather them ask than you, even if it's an inconvenient time.
Sure. Well, that makes total sense. Absolutely. So again, this is great, great information. Let's just say, again, you're a parent, you buy the book, you're starting out, you're like, I really know a lot about why I should be talking to my kids about this topic. So you buy the book, you just open the book, and I mean, I have a confession to make. I look at the table of contents right away, and I pick out like a couple of chapters of I know what I'm like. I'm gonna read those two chapters first, almost. I want
Yes,
to read those two chapters first, right?
of
So
course.
what are two chapters when you were writing the book that you really loved, and what two chapters do you want parents to get out of the most? Like, what do you point to? What two chapters do you point to right away?
Yes. So in the introduction, I actually say that because, parents, I mean, life is so full today that I don't expect every parent to be in a position to sit down and read a whole book right now.
Sure.
I mean,
Right.
that's why we do podcasts. That's why we try to make it more accessible because there's so much on your plate. And so it's really challenging. So the two chapters that I think of as really critical starting points for parents are chapter 3 and chapter 7. Chapter 3 is what is healthy exploration. Um, Most, if not all, kids will engage in exploration of their bodies at a pretty young age. Between 3 and 5, they start to do that. And this is a very common phase of life where kids start to get a sense that their body is bad because they may be touching their genitalia, or they may touch another person's genitalia out of curiosity, because sensory touch is how kids learn about everything,
Sure.
including their bodies. And so I really like that chapter because what it does is it gives you a solid foundation to distinguish things that are cause for concern behaviorally from a child, how to engage with those things, how to engage with what is normative and still set a framework for that. And I think it's the most relevant to most people right away. And so I want to make sure that parents have some good scripting for that. So chapter 3. And then chapter 7, what do I do if I learned something bad happened to them? I think these are the experiences that we never want for our kids, where there's an unwanted sexual experience, there's sexual abuse. And really, the book is meant to help people be proactive about that. And so I don't want parents to look at that chapter and say, well, that hasn't happened yet, so I'm not going to read it. I actually want you to read
Sure.
that first, because you're not going to be more equipped after that moment of disclosure than you could be ahead of time when you are calm and ready to receive that info. So those were the chapters that I think I flag first in my mind. Why? Because so much of the work I do is actually reactive and responsive to the aftermath of harm. where a person carries enormous shame about their body because of the ways family members react to that healthy exploration. And then obviously the long-term impacts of sexual trauma, and not just sexual trauma in childhood, but actually the responses or lack of responses from parents and other primary caregivers for them.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, great. Sounds like great chapters to read for sure.
Mm.
So what was your favorite part about writing the book, Dr. Giuliano? What was, when you first started out on writing the book, what was your hope when writing the book?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take that one first.
Sure.
Yeah, the hope in writing the book was really to give parents and educators models of healthy conversations that would prevent abuse. That really was my hope, is if there is one kid out there who is better off and protected from abuse by virtue of me writing this book, it will have made it worth it.
Right.
But I also hoped that parents would experience some healing in their own shame around their own sexual stories and sexual experiences and history through writing the book. I think in the second book, that is really a partner to this first book, Talking with Your Teen About Sex, I use a quote by a man, Robert Heinlein is, I think, his name, and it says, "When one teaches to learn." And I was really struck by that I think these books are really meant to help parents in their own sexual formations, and by extension, help their children as well. As far as what my favorite part of writing the book was, honestly, I think it was trying to think creatively about talking to young children in gradual ways. So much of the work I do is with teens and adults. And so being able to understand more with these young kids, and yeah, how do we make these principles digestible to a little kid? And how do I anticipate some of the left field situations that come up for these families? I mean, certainly
Right.
I hear a lot about them all the time, but what are some of the common, experiences parents would have was really fun for me. It was a good thought experiment and a good
Sure.
opportunity to sharpen my own skills in communication, but also try to think through um, how these conversations are going to trickle down into healthy formation for kids over time, which makes for healthier adults, which is something I'm pretty invested in.
Right. No, I mean, yeah, being a psychologist, I totally understand that. And like you said, I mean, if this book helps even just one kid, or just really help them out with it, I mean, it's well worth it. And basically, it's the same thing with any type of book or podcast or anything that you can bring forth to someone. If that information it can help someone, it's just one person. That's well worth it. Well worth the investment. That is for sure. So basically, at the kind of reached the end of the show here, just any last comment or any last content you want to get out there to the public on this book before we start talking about your next book?
What I would say is, I think that some people will read the book and feel like it doesn't give you enough. Like it will give you lots of examples, and you'll say, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this?
Sure.
And just reminding parents that I am entrusting your child to you, and having confidence that these tools that you'll get from the book will build enough of a foundation for you to think creatively over time. You do not have to be a psychologist to have conversations about sexuality. In fact, the USCCB has a 1993, I think it is, document that lays out healthy sex education, and it maps on very cleanly to the book. And so what that document says, and what I would say to you, is you are better equipped than anybody to have these conversations. It will take practice, and the practice will be worth it as we see the next generation grow up.
Right. Yeah, practice. Right. No one's perfect, but like the saying goes, practice kind of makes perfect, gets you better. And yeah, really, really, really cool stuff. So this book is called, again, Start Talking to Your Kids About Sex. Yep. And then the next one is, get this right, Start Talking to Your Teens About Sex. So I know that one is getting released very soon. You want to just briefly talk about that one?
Sure. So when I was pitching the first book to Ave Maria Press, they came back and said, hey, wait a second, we really would like you to write two, one for parents of young kids, 0 to 9, and then one for parents of kids 10 to 18. So first book, start talking to your kids about sex. Second book, talking with your teen about sex. And that's a bit of illustrative of the whole thing, which is as we're working with teens and walking with our teenagers, it's really not going to be as much of a lecture as it's going to be a dialogue. And you're inviting your teen into a space where, again, there's no one else they would want to talk with about sexuality than actually their parents, which I think to many parents can feel very unlikely. But I've seen this in practice with some of the people that I walk with, that if their parents can build channels of communication and make these conversations meaningful and come across as a person who is a resource to their teen, that's going to make this much more effective. And so that book really follows a very similar model as the first book. The first chapter allows parents to identify the barriers, what's getting in the way of talking with teens, what are the challenges with that. It's going to allow you to get some coaching on changes during puberty for boys and girls, and how do you talk with your teen about those things. Obviously, the traditional sex talk, how do you talk about sexual intercourse? And then it gets a bit more in depth to things like pornography, things like sexual attraction in general. How do we help our kids understand attractions as they move through the teen years? Certainly conversations about people who experience same-sex attraction, people who experience questioning around gender. There's a whole chapter on each of those pieces in the book. And then technology use obviously comes up, and unwanted sexual experiences come up with teens as well. So really mirrors the first book, but expands it and gets more in depth with conversations that are going to be well suited for teenagers.
Right. I mean, just being a business major. I mean, again, you talk about target audience, and again, I mean, I think these two books are set for great success for, like I say, younger kids and teenagers. It's a lot of same great stuff, but also different in many ways that what what your kids are going through in life. Like you said, they get older, the bodies change from when they're younger, and they have different questions. They want different, they come up with different conversations about it. So no, that's really, I think that's gonna be a great book, I think. So yeah, that one again is start talking to your teens about sex, and the first one is start talking to your kids about sex is the first book. So but Dr. Julia, again, thank you again so much for what you do, being a therapist and being a great author. Again, you can find the book at avemariapress.com, correct?
That's correct. Yes, and on Amazon and anywhere books are sold.
All right, we'll have a couple of links up in the description box below. But Dr. Julia, again, though, thank you for your time today and coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
All right, that's Dr. Julia Sadusky, everyone. We'll have links up down below too if you want to get in contact with her. You can do that as well. Otherwise, God willing, we'll see you next week, same time, same place. And stay in state grace, go to sacraments, and check out the two books. The first book we talked about today. Again, they are Start Talking to Your Kids About Sex. And the second one coming out this spring is Start Talking to Your Teens About Sex from Dr. Julia Sadusky. We'll see you next week, everyone. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Catholic Table Talk podcast, where everything Catholic is on the table. Don't forget to subscribe to Catholic Table Talk on your favorite podcast platform to get new episodes delivered directly to you every Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern.